All right, good evening, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are joining from today. Welcome to another edition in my partnership series. If you just allow me, trying to tidy things up from this side. Okay, so um, thanks for the feedback for last Sunday. Really positive feedbacks out there. Thanks to those of you that made comments and then just encouraged about the lessons you learned from my low accent story and journey so far. And today we are going to be building on that. Today I'm going to be sharing something very practical with you. And I want to assure you that what you are going to be learning today, of course, is going to be triple of the experience that you had in last Sunday's edition. And remember, share what I'm doing. I'm passionate about African emancipation, and what I'm doing in this series is helping to position as many entrepreneurs within the African space, whether you're operating from within Africa or outside of Africa, to make sure that we are all empowered to see that opportunity in partnership. And so that's why I'm having this series. And one other reason, of course, is because I believe that we are approaching a phase as a people, as a continent, where everything will be built around the business sector, such that entrepreneurs would need to have the right skills to embrace the opportunity that is on the way for Africa. And so for me, this is one of those reasons I'm really excited coming back here and having this conversation. And then apologies, a number of people mentioned that the last session there were, cracks here and there. I think that was network. And please, just in case you're experiencing the same thing on this conversation, quickly draw my attention to it. Hopefully, we can do something about that. Okay, so let's get to the key reason we are here today. Today, I'm going to be sharing on the topic practical tips for mitigating risk and maximizing opportunities in partnership ventures. Practical tips for mitigating risk and maximizing opportunities in partnership ventures. And I'm going to be addressing this conversation from quite a unique perspective. So I'm going to be addressing people. I really would not be addressing businesses. And there are strategic reasons for my decision. Number one, I'm discussing partnership. And number two, I believe that people make businesses. And if you ask me, 90 something percent of times when businesses failed, they failed because of people problem. And even those that were not directly because of people problem, you'd find that indirectly they failed because of people problem. So because of that, my focus will really be around partnership venture, and then addressing you as a partner, or whether you started that business or you are coming in, whether as an investor or you're bringing technical expertise into that business. So my focus is going to be you, and I will not be addressing this from the organizational setup again, for very good reasons, which I have pointed out. Now, many partnerships have failed, and this also buttresses what I'm saying. So, a good example of a partnership gone bad is the relationship that was for some of you. I grew up hearing the story about the Beatles, and one of those persons that really talked about the Beatles, which was a musical group, happened to be Steve Jobs. And something that struck me was when Steve Jobs mentioned that you can learn entrepreneurship, you can learn business and relationship from the Beatles, and that you should just study these guys. But did you know as well that you can also learn how not to do partnership from the story of the Beatles? Go check these guys out. You'll find behind the story that these were four great guys, and they are much spoken of over the years, even though these guys operated in the 1960s, but very well spoken of. And then what really led to the end of that partnership? The fact that over the years, there was a situation where some of them, so let me put it this way, there was a difference in ideology. They grew up to an extent that some had wanted to be more politically outspoken in their lyrics and in the kind of thing, the kind of composition they were coming up with, while we had those who just wanted to do music for entertainment and for commercial purpose. So the same thing, the same diversity, strength in diversity was the reason that led to the death of that business. And it's why this conversation is critical, which is why, again, I said many businesses die because of differences in relationship. And they don't die because of some organizational magical things. Really, most businesses that have died because of some relationship differences. So this is why I am focusing heavily on that conversation around relationship building within the context of partnership. So let's start first by talking about mitigating risk. How do you mitigate risk? How do you make sure that you are managing risk? Take the example of the B2 again. I said something very crucial. They had their diversity. Now, I see partnership as a coming together in unity in the midst of diversity. In essence, the best partnerships are not partnerships where there is a meeting of the mind solely, but partnerships where there is a leveraging on the diversity in the minds of those involved. And at the end of this series, you are likely to reason with me on this very point I made, because I'm going to revisit it. So, how do you make sure that you are mitigating risk in that relationship? I'm going to drop the points, drop them hard, and then just summarize and move on, because I actually have so many things I need to be sharing with you today. Now, the first thing you need to understand is you need to understand the risk element in relationships. Understand the risk element in relationships. Now, this is very crucial because you need to take that business like a child. If you are at this point, maybe you are married or you have some responsibilities towards a child, and then you have a partner, you're likely to agree with me that at the different phases, the different levels of growth of that child, the partners have, different ideologies or different perspectives, perhaps, on what should be the focus for that child. So you're likely to find in the African settings, anyway, which this conversation is really helpful for, you're likely to find a father really attached to the female child, and you're likely to find a mother really attached to the male child in some cases. Now, when this is the case, if you see the case of an only born, you're likely to find one or both of the parents really attached to that child. So it's the same thing. There is that love factor, and it's the same love factor that leads to the destruction of the business eventually. And what am I saying in essence? We have many partnerships that have gone bad, yes, because the partners thought that they meant the very best for that business, but in meaning the best for the business, it was also forgotten that the person you are also having conversation with must have had the very best for the business. And this is why I usually would say that, look, you need to build open communication. You need to have open line of communication, and it helps a lot. It helps very well. So just in case you haven't seen that series, I had a session where I discussed the key elements of communication and trust building in partnerships. You need to see that session. You need to check it out. So communication is very key because everybody loves the child. The child in this context is the business. Everybody loves the child, and you need to learn to share thoughts. And one of those things I mentioned in that session is that you need to make sure that you are open enough and let the best position, let the best opinion win. Everything that is done should be in the best interest of the child. Now, this second point I'm going to talk about, like it or not, it's always important to create exit strategies that prioritizes the need and the best interest of the business over the personal or private interest of the partners. I'm going to repeat that. You should make sure that you are prioritizing the best interest of the business over the interest of the partners. And this is crucial. I know, for instance, at Law Accent, one of those things our litigation team does very strongly is, child custody, marriage, matrimonial matters. And in dealing on child custody matters over the years, one of those things I have observed, which I've realized, is the fact that people could be very emotionally attached, such that they are unable to prioritize the best interest of the child. When you think business, you should at some point also think child. And in child custody matters, lawyers that practice in that field would readily tell you that when it comes to child custody matters, the golden rule is the best interest of the child. So you find the man, the woman, you find the parents go to court and argue how they are the best person looking out for the best interest of the child. At times, you would even see people cook up a lot of stories. That's when you see people that have been keeping receipts of school fee since the year the child was given birth to, and you'll be shocked. So you'll find that people go to court with strategy to demonstrate they have the best interest of that child. Now, that is on the side. Let's come back to business and see how applicable that concept is. Again, I'll tell a story in the course of this session that I believe will drive home the point. But for now, the point I'm making is that partners must come together to agree that whatever is being done, the best interest of the partnership must override the private interest of the partners. And how do you achieve this? You achieve this by defining what the partnership is all about from the beginning of the relationship. You achieve this by talking about what you will never do. Somebody once said, strategy is as much about what the business would never do as it is about what the business would do. You need to agree on all of these things. You need to agree where we are unable to agree on potential situations. How do we resolve this? One of those key things you can do is to go back and do an assessment of what is being discussed and how it relates to what parties, the partners, agreed when that child was given birth to. It's as good as saying, if I give birth to a child and I name the child Sam, and then later on in the journey of that child, I decide that, look, I just got tired with calling the child Sam. Now I want to call the child John. The question is, did we agree to call Sam John from the beginning? If we didn't agree on that, and my partner is saying no to John, it means we either need to find a common ground or I give up naming that child John because there is no common ground. I hope that makes some sense. So, in essence, what you write early enough, what you define early enough, has a way of helping partners to be able to have something to gauge, to know that which the business is supposed to be all about is being followed and it's not being deviated from. I would also create a blend of balance to what I'm saying, because it's also always important to have that flexibility where partners do not lose touch with ongoing development in their industry, such that they insist or begin to insist on how and what the business was created or is all about, and then they lose touch with the reality of ongoing development within the society. We need a balance and a blend of understanding to all these things so that they are not taken outside of context, which is very crucial. Now, having said this, the next point I want to talk about is for you to make sure that, in achieving this, you need to write the goals. What are the business objectives? What is the mission? What is the vision? You need to write all of these things, and they then become the parameter through which you gauge every action, which is very, very crucial. And then, next point I would want to say is, it's important for you as an African entrepreneur to understand the difference between sitting on the wheels and taking the back seat. And unfortunately, over the years, this is one of the things I've seen that has bedeviled us as a people. We have that urge for power, and we think that power can only be achieved when we are the driving seat. Of course, if I decide to sit at the back seat and I commit myself to a driver, the driver has power over my life, my safety. Let me use the word as, power over my safety to a very large extent, because the driver is at the wheels and can do and undo. But the point again is that there are a lot of things that can be influenced from the back seat. You need not be in front. In essence, where and when you get to a level in partnership and you see, especially when you are at the driving seat, being at the driving seat would mean you are actively involved in the business, whether as the CEO, managing director, or in some other executive ways. If you are actively involved in that business and you see that you get on a journey where so you may have an understanding of the destination, but how to get there, you are not the best driver at it. Do not be ashamed to take the back seat. Actually, taking the back seat just shows ownership, and it does not mean that you are weak. And this is where we miss it as African entrepreneurs. We love to drive our own car. We love to be at the helms of affairs of that business. And really speaking, a lot of times, what we call partnership is a silent dictatorship where somebody is still the one having to dictate everything, and then it's just self styled partnership. We need to move out of that shadow and then create the real thing, which is a healthy relationship that is built on respect, equity, and trust, for people to be able to come in and then pitch their tent based on their skills, based on what they are able to bring in into that business. I'll give an example here, and I hope that this drives on the point. Now, some of you would know Jack Dorsey, for instance, who I believe founded Twitter, and I think with some other people. Now, at some point, he had a vision of Twitter as a social enterprise, but that vision was not sustainable because the brand was getting big. Um, a lot was happening. I mean, this was a brand at some point that had to take away from their network a whole president of what is called I mean, the most powerful nation of the world. I will not say arguably so. But the point is, Twitter was that powerful. And Twitter was beginning to demonstrate or beginning to manifest that tendency of growing really, really big at some point. And Jack Dorsey was not the best person at that point to manage what then seemed to be the next course, next hurdle for the brand to climb. Because at that point, there was a need to begin to discuss, how do we make Twitter to be profitable? Not merely as a social enterprise. But now, how do we commercialize this opportunity that is out there? And there was really, really, difference in the way every stakeholder saw it. And at the end of the day, Jack Dorsey had to step down as the CEO of Twitter. And for me, that's a good example of what a real founder that has the best interest of the business should do. And this is an example for us as African entrepreneurs. So, are there lessons we can pick from Jack Dorsey? I would think so. And I will share with you some of those lessons that I believe would be of help in building that business. Number one experience or number one point I would want to share with you, you need to focus on the company's best interest. I've hinted on this earlier on. It's important for you to never at any point get personal with whatever is being done by the business. I mean, years ago there was this song I that was really trended, and I loved it so much. I thought I was going to get it played on my wedding day, but I forgot anyway. So don't blame me for that. But the summary of that song um, was a story of a man who was really pouring out his heart about the fact that he needed to let go of his only child, his only daughter, in marriage. And, one of those lines of that song is, though I hate to see you go, I know you have your life to live, and blah, 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 blah. The point is this: that business has its life to live. If you're going to grow a multinational business, you need to know that that business has its life to live. The business may have been groomed and nurtured by you over the years, but you have to get to that phase where you start telling yourself that this business is not me and I am not the business. It would help you a lot to begin to grow a mindset that allows you to create an enabling environment for other people to come in and help you with the project that you are running with. Remember, again, in Africa, it takes an entire village to raise a child. And this is the same thing if we are going to be leveraging our understanding and our culture as a people in the business space. It will take us a long, long journey that would be profitable to economies within Africa when we begin to get this right. So you have to focus on the company's best interest. You have to know that times will come when you are not the best driver for that company. Times will come when you need to take the back seat. Times will come when you may even be pulled out or forced out of what you started. But you need to know that you are different from the company and always be on the lookout for the best interest of that business. The next thing is you need to recognize strengths and weaknesses among partners. A lot of times we are so entangled in our ability to get things done that we forget to see the gold, the diamond, the strengths that are placed around us, which are the people around us. Take the example of Jack Dorsey again, for instance. It was great at that social enterprise approach, but then came the time when it wasn't the best approach for Twitter and he had to step down. His maturity at handling that really, really helped him to still be effective from behind the scenes. And this is what we need to do. We need to recognize uh, people's strengths. We need to understudy and understand people's weaknesses and then leverage on all of these to build a solid thing. I think this was what Job was talking about when he was referring to the Beatles as a perfect example of understanding the strength in diversity. How four different people can come together and have a blend of skill set that is enrooted, or I mean, it is rooted rather in strengths and in weaknesses, and then it brings out a melody that really, really change the entire dynamics of music and music production across the globe. So we need to learn all of these things, how to recognize, strengths and weaknesses among partners. Don't be shocked about this. There are things that I consider myself as not being the best person to discuss with my daughter, and I consider my wife to be the best person. Now, this is understanding capacity, understanding strength, and knowing and understanding who should go on what at different times. So it's really, really very key for you to identify that among people. So again, for many people that finance, many years ago, I had this situation where uh, this particular entrepreneur felt bullied by the investor that invested in our business because the investor was seeking to know all and everything and was just pouring in instructions on what should be done and all. And at some point, this entrepreneur really felt that everything was taken away, including the ability to be able to make decisions. This was the technical person. The investor was not the technical person. The investor invested in this technical person to drive the business. But again, the investor became entangled, became emotional with the fact that their money was in that business. And based on that emotional situation, began to make dictates on what should be done, what should not be done. And that began, it started affecting the business. And until this entrepreneur had to begin to fight it out that, look, I am the entrepreneur here, I'm the technical person, and I'm the one that should be, handling this whole thing and then making reports. Yes, there is room for making opinions, but when those opinions become instructions and mandated orders, it becomes a problem. And this is one of those things that lead to the demise of a business. So you need to be on the lookout for that. And if you're an entrepreneur, or better still, an investor, please take your seat at the investor side. I remember most sometimes when I'm taking my mom on a ride, even though I'm the driver, she's the one that is really driving. Sometimes she has to match the brake with me. And there were times when you might agree with me, the person that is seated with the driver in some cases even does more, and then you begin to wonder, please, are you the one driving or I'm the one driving? But in business, this is what happens with many investors that sit at that side and are making a dictate of what the driver should and should not do. You need to remember that you sat beside them in the first place because you have trusted them to take the wheels of the car. And in business, when you invest, you need to trust that entrepreneur, that partner, to take that helm of affairs and take that car and drive it to their best judgment. You can bring in opinions, but don't mandate and don't instruct, don't insist. Very, very crucial. And I hope you are learning something. Please remember to share if there are lines that really connect with you. I would love to hear your thoughts. I would love to hear your questions. And I would love to really get feedbacks from you, okay? And then remember to follow this channel as well, okay? Thank you so, so much for that. So, as I try to wrap up this, the next thing I would love to talk about is the fact that you should make sure that you have a working relationship that embraces change and growth. Remember, I said earlier on, you need not take what I said earlier on about, people coming in and wanting to change the vision. It has to be a blend of a balanced conversation. And here is where I'm creating that balance. If you recall the story of Nokia, for instance, Nokia took over the telecoms industry at some point, but their inability to be flexible and their refusal to grow, to embrace change and growth, was what led to the death of that brand. So, if Dossi, for instance, wasn't open to embrace change, if he had insisted on being the leader, he could have made a dictator, and he could have led to the wreck of Twitter as a brand at that time. So we have a lot to learn from this guy. We have a lot to learn in making sure that we are making the right um, decision that will help the business. And then next point is you need to value collaboration, you need to value teamwork, and this is the way to achieve business growth. Anywhere quote me, collaboration is the right place and the right way to go. Value collaboration, value teamwork. The teamwork makes the team work. So is said by some people out there, and I agree with that anyway. And then, so the last point I'm going to be dropping as I try to wrap up this conversation, I see it's 30 minutes already, which is wow. See, don't forget this. Many entrepreneurs they lose, they lose resilience and perseverance when they are taken away from that driver's seat and they are made to go to the back seat and take their space there. In essence, what am I saying? When some entrepreneurs are encouraged to take the back seat and hand over the baton, they get into a depression mode, which they may not even admit to themselves, which is unfortunate. You need to make sure you're checking that to be sure that having an understanding of this, taking the back seat is not bad, it's not wrong. If you want to build a transgenerational business, you need to invest in people, you need to be willing to have partnerships, and you need to be willing to take the back seat. And really, this is how you can enter into rest before the ultimate rest, which is another conversation I usually have with entrepreneurs. You need to enter into rest before the ultimate rest. You need to learn to take the back seat and trust people well enough to allow them to take the front seat and drive you. I hope this has really helped somebody today. Remember again, you can share this. My name is Eyitayo Ogunyemi, and remember to follow and like what you've heard today. Feel free to give me a shout out. Feel free to drop your questions and let the conversation continue. Thank you once again. Have for yourself a lovely, lovely week ahead. Bye.